Once upon a time, one man spent large portions of his free time binge playing Kerbal Space Program. This series is the result. Hello everyone, I am Peppino here playing more Kerbal Space Program. This is episode 2 of this series, and if you remember last episode, we are working on a base on Minmus. We placed two sections of our base down on the surface of Minmus last episode, as well as stranding one up in orbit. So this episode we are going to basically focus on just taking care of that one and getting it down to the surface as well. Now the reason it's stranded is because of due to technical problems during the launch. It probably does not have enough fuel to land safely on the surface of Minmus. So the first thing that we're going to do is send up some extra fuel. And so here we see me launching two fuel tanks as well as two nuclear engine stages, which we're going to be able to use to carry things, whether it's fuel or ships or whatever. We'll be able to use these to carry things around the Kerbin system very fuel efficiently. Now, the reason I'm launching two at once is basically just to test this launcher and see how powerful it is. Now, that ends up being not the best idea. I probably should have just launched one, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. The whole point of this is just to get enough fuel to refuel our other base section and then get that to Minmus. And whatever fuel we have left over after that is just extra. So there we see we send away the last asparagus stage of rockets, and I'm actually past my apoapsis and falling back towards Kerbin, and I'm not in orbit yet. So what I need to do is start burning pretty far up to hopefully extend the time that I have before I'll crash back into the atmosphere. And eventually, after quite a while of burning up, we get that to happen. So after that, it's not too difficult to extend our orbit a little bit more, and there we go. As you can see, we are now stably in orbit around Kerbin, and I decided, since I don't really need the other nuclear engine stage, I'm just going to use it to take care of this debris and deorbit it right away, just so we don't have extra things cluttering up low Kerbin orbit, because they are very annoying when you're trying to switch to other objects and things like that. So we take this, detach both of them, and we just got to work this all the way down to the back there and dock to that engine. And the reason that that engine can undock from this is because I was hoping to get this up into orbit with both of these fuel tanks full, and then I would have two different fuel tanks that I could use, but they weren't quite full, so basically I ended up with 1.5, which, like I said, it doesn't really matter, because whatever fuel we have is just extra. So I refuel this other nuclear engine stage, and I'm just going to flip around the front. As you can see here, it ends up with a little bit less than an orange tank and a half, but if you can put a full orange tank into orbit each launch, that's pretty good. And I do have some other launch designs that I think in the future we'll be able to put more than this up into orbit as far as fuel goes. So anyway, we bring it around, and you can see also there's another section that I forgot to mention. It's an RCS tug. We don't really do much with it now, and I think off camera I actually decoupled all that and I separated it so that it just stayed in orbit around Kerbin. because basically I didn't need it right now, and I figured it would be more useful to save for later. So it's just kind of floating around randomly. Now here we just try to set up our maneuver nodes so that we can get a close encounter, and eventually I just start burning prograde there, and you see we can bring it down to within about 2 kilometers. So that's pretty good, and we warp all the way around until we get our close intersection, and then we have to just start slowing our distance or our speed relative to the target before our distance gets too low. And we actually lost our encounter in that process, so I had to end up burning a little bit more to get it back, but I eventually managed it. And so our first intersection is right there, and we bring it down, slow ourselves. Basically, it's just the long process of getting close to the target, slowing your relative velocity to nearly zero, then getting a little closer and slowing yourself a little more, and repeating that until you are like this, very close to the target, and you can attempt to dock. So that's what we'll do now, as this is just about out of fuel. We're going to bring it around, and the problem I realized is this section doesn't actually have RCS. So we're going to switch to the big section, and unfortunately it is nighttime, which makes for not as fun of a video to watch, and I'm sorry about that. But I had to dock when I could get the encounters, because I didn't want to spend extra time basically just waiting and waiting until this happened during the day. So there we get a little bit of light, and it becomes watchable right at the end as we come in here nice and easy for a nice gentle docking of our spacecraft. And there we go. Then we can refuel the stage that is bound for Minmus, and then we'll be ready to set off. So here we go, just transferring all of the fuel that we need to. And after a little while, there it is fueled and ready to go to Minmus, with Luke and Hadzer Kerman, who have been patiently waiting up in orbit for their refueling to arrive. They're probably very excited to finally be actually going somewhere. So we set up our maneuver node, warp around until we reach the burn node, and there we go. Hadzer and Luke, calm and collected as they burn for Minmus. Yeah, these guys have an interesting ride in this series. They survived their rocket coming apart basically during launch, which could have been catastrophic. And they go on to do some pretty interesting things in the future, so hopefully you'll stay tuned for that in future episodes. But for now, they have the simple task of navigating their way down to the surface of Minmus and linking up with the other parts of the base, which really isn't all that hard. The hardest part is now behind them, and that's just getting an encounter with Minmus. Once you get here, it's pretty hard to mess up. So, we get down to the periapsis, and we burn for orbit. There we go. And then we have to do a quick few corrections so that our orbit will eventually bring us above the targeted landing zone. And so, after just a couple orbits around and a couple different corrections, we have a daylight landing opportunity, and we decide to take it. And once again, it's very nice how little fuel you actually need to do anything here. Once you get out to Minmus, it's pretty simple. But I don't know that we quite had enough fuel in this beforehand to do it. So anyway, you see here we've done a few more orbital corrections, and now we ready to come in for landing. And you can see right down there, that little dot is our other pieces of our base. And we are looking very good so far. This is, again, as a reminder, the second housing section of our base. We already have one housing section as well as a science lab section down on the ground. And this will be the last housing section I plan on adding. It will give us the ability to store, I think, up to 22 kerbals total now. And then I do have some other stuff that I'm going to add to the base, so look forward to that as well. The next few episodes are basically still focused on making this base really awesome. And so Hadzer and Luke seem to be very happy down there. They are very excited to be finally arriving at their destination after a long layover. I have to imagine it'd be like if you were at the airport and you were told your flight's been delayed for a couple days. That would really suck, but they're finally getting to their destination, and they can begin to do science and play around and whatever else astronauts colonizing another world would do, I guess. But mostly they'll probably just be happy to get outside of this capsule for the first time in a few days. At least it's not like the interplanetary missions where they're stuck in there for months or years, but it's still probably going to be really nice for them to get down to the surface. And speaking of the surface, we have touchdown safely, and we can get rid of our rocket stage here. And basically I just start burning and get going way too fast, so I'm on a minimus escape trajectory. Then I burn down and realize I'm going to hit the ground, so then I burn back up, not wanting to hit the ground, and this whole time I'm just wasting a ton of fuel, and I'm going very fast, where I'm either going to hit the ground, or I'm going to go flying out of orbit around Minmus, and probably out of Kerbin's sphere of influence. And I don't really have any fuel anyway, so there's no point in saving this, and I decide the best thing to do to minimize the random things I have flying around my world, I will just crash it into Minmus. So that's what we do. Just burn straight down and enjoy it hitting the surface of Minmus at 400 meters per second, sending debris flying off very, very quickly into space. But luckily for us, we don't have to worry about it anymore. So we eventually switch back to Hadzer and Luke, as they have now prepared to drive the base over and link it up with the rest of the sections. Here we see the view from inside the cockpit. I think it's pretty cool. And again, this thing is driving around at about 3-4 meters per second top speeds, but it's not like it's in danger of tipping over or anything, so I will take it. It's a slow process, but when you use time warp and the magic of video editing, it makes it seem quite a bit quicker, so it's not too bad. But anyway, this was the last thing that we're going to do in this episode is just get this docked here and take a look at the base, or at least the main section of the base in all its glory. And next episode and the next few episodes, like I said, we will work on adding a couple more sections and rovers and all of that. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it as I deploy all of our solar panels and antenna here so we can really take a look at things. And in the future, we are hopefully going to add a lot of fuel and other things. So we'll see you next time.